Yeah. Okay.
That's Q&A?
Yeah, tonight's Q&A.
Okay. Why is it that Abraham was accepting the wealth of Egypt willingly, but he didn't accept Sedom's wealth, even though he conquered the kings that Sedom couldn't conquer?
So the commentaries talk about this question, and there are at least I think 6 answers. Well, I'll tell you 2 that I know that I think are very important. So Rashi says that he refused the wealth of Sedom because he had a promise from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would make him rich. That's what Rashi says. Well, the question then is, how do you know that this isn't exactly how HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to make you rich? By making you win the war and collecting the spoils of war. This is like the old joke of the guy, there's a flood, and they come through with the jeeps, and they say, you better get out of the flood. And he says, God will save me. And then the flood's up to the 2nd floor, and they come through with a boat. Better get out, God will save me. And he ends up on his roof, and they come with a helicopter, God will save me. And then the water goes up, and he drowns. He comes before God, and he says, God, I trusted you, and why didn't you save me? He says, I sent you a jeep, and I sent you a boat, I sent you a helicopter. What more did you want? So the question on Rashi, which the Maharal asks, is how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu know that this isn't exactly the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu had promised to make him rich? Maharal says a principle which I don't know if he doesn't explain it there in the Gur Aryeh, and that is he knew that the bracha would not come through war. Which means that his accepting money from Egypt was his principle, that he's prepared to accept money. And Sedom is an exception because it couldn't come through war. That's one answer. Another answer, which I saw in a sefer, which my Rebbe Zatzal tried to reprint, I don't know if he can print it all 5 times, I think it's called Divrei Bina, Rabbi Bialarov, and he says as follows. You live in an area and you perform your actions there. Your actions have an effect on the surroundings. If you do mitzvahs, you inject the surroundings with holiness and with spirituality. And the person who does the transgressions injects the world, the surroundings with tumah, defilement, spiritual degradation. Now, there are limits to this. Sometimes a thing that's tummy, we have a lot of laws, where something that's tummy can be rehabilitated. You can be metayer it. You can get rid of the tumah and restore it to use. You could even then, after that, make it holy. But there are limits beyond which this can't be done anymore. The thing where a thing's spiritual potential is extinguished by the events that it has undergone. So, for example, a Jew who makes something into an idol and worships it, that has to be just destroyed. There's nothing else you can do. You can't save it. You got to burn it and destroy it. So now, Avraham saw that the physical surroundings in Egypt, and Egypt was no spiritual paradise, but the physical surroundings were not yet contaminated so much that they couldn't be rehabilitated. They couldn't be elevated and used positively. That's why he accepted the money from Pharaoh. But with Sodom, he saw that the surroundings were entirely contaminated and that they couldn't be rehabilitated, and that's why he didn't accept. And if you, that's as far as the explanation I saw goes. But the obvious point is that when Sedom was destroyed, the whole physical environment was destroyed also. Why is that? Let's say they were wicked. Let the Kodesh Baruch Hu cause them to die and leave their goods for someone better to use. In Mishlei it says the wicked gathers a great amount of wealth to be left to the tzaddik. Why did the physical surroundings have to be destroyed? And the answer is because in that case, the pollution was so great it couldn't be rehabilitated. And Avraham saw that, he understood that, and that's why he refused to accept from Sodom. Both of these are cases where the refusal is to Sodom is the exception, and the accepting money from Pharaoh is the rule. There's a third pshat, which I saw in Rav Dessler, a very sharp pshat, based on reading the words carefully. Avraham says to the king of Sedom, I'm not taking anything from you. Don't say you made me rich. I don't want you to say you made me rich. Where does Avraham get the idea that if he does take, the king of Sodom is going to say he made Avraham rich? Listen to the dialogue, the prior dialogue between Abraham and the king, statement of the king of Sodom, and you tell me where it is. Think carefully about the words. The king of Sodom says to Abraham, give me the people and the property, take for yourself. This is after the war. Avraham was victorious over the 4 kings. King of Sodom comes to him and says, give me the people. I'm a king. Without people, a king can't make a living. He just knows how to be king over people. I have no people. Give me the people. But I'm not asking you for the money. The money, take for yourself. Something desperately wrong with that statement. Who's in control right now? Who has ownership of all the stuff? People, property, land, airspace, everything. Who's in control? Abraham. That's why he has to come and ask Avraham, right? Because Abraham's in control of the whole thing. Now, he says, give me the people and the property. Take for yourself. Take? He already has it. Excuse me. That's why you're coming to him and asking, isn't it? Because he already has control over it. What do you mean, take? That's the way he looks at it. It's really mine. It's really mine. Yeah, he's got the guns. It's really mine. And if he keeps it, he's taking it. He's taking it for me. Right? And that's why Avraham says, so he's going to say he made me rich. Because he regards it all as a beautiful, beautiful diuk. And Rav Desta says, the reason why Avraham doesn't want to do it is because he can't be an accessory to the crime of thinking that it all belongs to him. If he goes through it and takes the property, and he says, King of Sodom says, I made you rich, Avraham is the cause of him making this drastic spiritual mistake. And even for the king of Sodom, Abraham can't do that. A very deep, deep pshat. And part of the proof of it is that Avraham davens for Sedom. He davens that they shouldn't be destroyed. So it's clear he took responsibility for them. So there are 3 answers to the question. There are more, but those are 3.
I guess that beats the second question. What can we learn from Sedom? What mistakes distinctly did Sedom make? I know we did it sodomy, but what mistakes did they make?
So I'm not a master of Medrash. I haven't read extensively in Medrash, but the one theme that you do hear is that they created an anti-chesed society. The one incident that we know for sure, the angels come, although they look like people, and they're going to sleep in the town square, and so Lot offers them hospitality. No, we'll sleep on the street. And finally pushes them hard, and they come in, and the people of Sodom are enraged. What did you do? Took people into your house. In Sodom, earn your way. Pay rent at a hotel. We don't give charity here. If you like, you can hear echoes of the early capitalist idea. No loafers. We want people here who earn, take responsibility to support themselves. We're not promoting sponging. So you created an anti-caste society. So I heard from Rav C. Kozhlevsky, with whom I had the privilege to spend a year learning. He said, but chesed, loving kindness, is not a mitzvah for non-Jews. So why they're being punished for violating a mitzvah? It's not a mitzvah for non-Jews. And he said, it was part of much longer exposition. He said, there are mitzvos, commandments, for which you have to follow. If you don't follow, you're liable, it can be punished. And then there are laws by which the world survives. And if you violate one of those, you can end up endangering your life, even though there's no mitzvah one way or the other. Is there a mitzvah not to put an airtight covering over your city to protect it from the elements? No, it's just that if it's really airtight, eventually everyone's going to asphyxiate because you'll run out of oxygen. You're not being punished for violating a law. You just ran out of oxygen, that's all. There is a Gemara in Shabbos that says there's a disease called askara. And asker, it says, is a punishment for laxity in Torah learning. So the Gemara says, but women suffer from it also because they distract their husbands from learning. Goyim suffer from it. They distract Jews from learning. Children suffer from it. The Gemara says, because they distract their fathers from learning. It's not their fault. That's right, but the Torah lives on it. It's the oxygen of the world. So when a child asks something from a father when he's learning, the child has to think 3 times. Is it worthwhile to stop my learning to do this for the child? Is it important for the child? Is the child in danger? Or is it a trivial thing which the child can live without? He's got to think about that. Otherwise, he's putting his child in danger. So chesed, all in chesed, Baruch created the world as an expression of loving kindness. You set up a society that's anti-loving kindness intentionally. You're setting up a society that's in opposition to the oxygen that sustains the world. That's where it comes from. Anyway, deep things going on here. Yeah.
A question I tried to formulate it. We know that in Judaism, in religious Judaism, there's a big range of different sects. And many times they have strong opinions, and many times they look at the other sect as absolutely wrong, or they have strong words about the other part. And in many, and within Hasidism and within the Yeshivat Ohr, within Sephardi, and everyone's looking at each other like I'm the right one, and everyone else is either wrong or incorrect, or something even stronger than that. And the question is, from Hashem's point of view, is it possible? Could we say that Hashem really, in a certain way, accepts all of them? Could they all be right? Is there only one real way?
Okay, this is an important question. It's actually an important group of questions. First of all, there's a difference between being right, as if somewhere in the sky there's a halacha written down, and did you get it or didn't you get it, versus being justified in what you're doing and believing. It is possible to be justified even if you're not right. All the evidence in your possession may point in one direction. And you're a reasonable person follows the evidence that he has, and you can be justified and you can be praised, and there can be no critique of what you do because that's all the material you had to go on. Up until about 200 years ago, when a person had a fever, medical practice was to bleed him. That was the position that was taken from ancient times. All the greatest scholars of the body agreed that that was the thing to do. We don't do it anymore. Can you guess why? Because it isn't really good for you. Right? But those people could be all tzaddikim. They could all be 100% praiseworthy, and people whom you want to think of as examples and so forth and so on, because they used all of the best information they had at the time. If the Sanhedrin makes a decision and you follow what the Sanhedrin says, what you're doing is appropriate, even if 10 years later the Sanhedrin changes its mind, and you have to bring a chatas for what you did before. Still, what you did was appropriate. Had you violated what the Sanhedrin said at that time, that would have been wrong. And the fact that the Sanhedrin changes its mind later doesn't rehabilitate your action. So the idea of what's written in the heavens doesn't determine the appropriateness of what I do. Now, we have such a thing as machlokes, and when you have Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel, they disagreed, and sometimes Tanoim disagreed, shall I say, strongly, but and maybe the ultimate decision of the Sanhedrin is like Rabbi Kiva against Rabbi Shmuel. Nobody says Rabbi Shmuel is bad or evil or wicked or deficient in any way. He had his opinion. He was dealing with all the Talmud Torah material. He didn't make any obvious mistakes. Usually they're not ignorant of something, although that happens too from time to time. And the material is ambiguous, and it could be read more than one way. The Ramban, in his introduction to the Milchamas Hashem, says anyone who's studied Talmud knows that if you want to prove a proposition on the basis of the Talmud, you're going to find portions that support you and portions that oppose you, and you're going to have to analyze them, and you're going to have to weigh them up and evaluate them to see which are stronger, and different people can come to different conclusions on that. So that's one type of disagreement. So now, for example, Let's take a Sephardi who looks at Ashkenazim and he says, most of Ashkenazi meat is treif. Because the Sephardi minimum standard for meat is what we Ashkenazim call glat. He won't tolerate it if it's not glat. Ashkenazi poskim don't hold that way. They hold it doesn't have to be glat. Does the Sephardi say all you Ashkenazim are going to Gehenna because you're eating treif meat? Not if he's smart. What he says is there was machlokes rishonim, and my community followed this rishon, and their community followed that rishon. They were both holy people. These rishonim, they were both great scholars. They disagreed about this. So, and the disagreement was never settled. We didn't have a Sanhedrin. So our group followed this one, and your group followed that one. I wouldn't eat your meat, but I'm not going to say that you're going to suffer because you're doing an avera, because you have the authority to lean on. That's the sane approach. I'm not talking about insane people who go beyond. Then you have cases where halacha is paskin on the basis of the times because of overriding needs of the times. I would say at least 90% of all Jewish educational institutions do not follow the laws of the Talmud. They don't do it. They just don't do what the Talmud said, the Mishnah, the Gemara. What you're supposed to learn first, at what age you're supposed to learn various things. They don't do those things. Why? Because they saw a necessity, based on other Torah considerations, to do it differently. Well, you could have a disagreement about that. There's our groups today, like the Zilberman group, which says we should go back to what the Talmud says. And the others say, no, we shouldn't go back to what the Talmud says. Now, if you think that you're answering a practical need, which Gemara sources or Talmudic sources agree is an important need and should be taken into account, and you think you're answering that and the other guy isn't, you're going to feel the other guy's dangerous because he's not answering it. And the other guy says, you're abandoning the Talmud at a time when it isn't necessary, and the Talmud is our guide, and the Talmud is the Holy of Holies, and you have no right to abandon it. So we're talking about serious matters here. We're not talking about a mabakach. So you could understand that people would be concerned about it and even get passionate about it. But if they allow that to cross the level of not loving the other person and not respecting the other person because he has a Torah view, that's a genuine Torah view, then he's going too far. And that's a human failing. Chazon Ish, who was, I'm not really bucky in the Chazon Ish, but the things that I've heard was so, he had such a broad scope. He understood things from so many different points of view. And I didn't see it inside, but he was quoted to me as saying, let the splits that take place, whether yeshivas that split, Itri split into three, and others split up, and the Hasidism that split up, why do they split up? He said, because if you are serving Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Shem Shamayim, and you're being Moshe Nefesh, you're doing it for the sake of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and you're being Moshe Nefesh, means you're making supreme effort, 17 hours a day, 6 days a week, or 7 days a week, and for many people, you have to believe you're right. Otherwise, you can't psychologically work yourself up into that kind of a dedication. And for some people, I can't be right unless the people disagree with me are wrong, because then maybe I'm not right. And then they're going to lose all their motivation, and that's where some of the kano, some of the opposition, which goes over the bounds, comes from, which is a really Hasidic idea. You're taking something which is really inappropriate, but tracing it back to its root in something holy, because everything comes from a root that something's holy, which gives you a different perspective on it. It's really this holy principle used wrongly, taken out of place, which means it isn't just evil. So then you come to understand that although it's being used wrongly, still it's something which in its essence you can respect. These are the ways in which one should look at these kinds of differences. My Rebbe Zatzal was on a first-name basis with all of the leaders of all of the Torah groups that pledge allegiance to the Torah. He appeared at their functions, and they all came to him. They all sought his ideas and his eitzah, because he was able to honor them all, even though he had his Masorah, and he followed his Masorah without any hesitation. I was with him 1981, before your parents were born, at the Aguda Convention in America. It was Friday night, there were 3,000 people there, and they were singing Lachadodi, and of 3,000 people, one was clapping his hands in time to the music. That was my Rebbe. 1 out of 3,000. And I can guarantee you it didn't cost him anything. Because that's what his father did. And 2,999 disagree with him? So what? That's what my father did. That's what I'm doing. Right? The world could disappear. I'm not interested. So that's that attitude of having fidelity to your own tradition, together with honoring the others and appreciating the others and seeking friendship with the others. That's the way it's supposed to be done.
And this works even with philosophical. You mentioned halacha, the Rabbi mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, when I started Hashkafa, especially when I started Kabbalah, the Rabbi Zatzal told me, just keep in mind that just like there are machlokes about fish and chickens, there are machlokes about philosophical ideas also. The Rambam and the Ravid disagreed. If a person thinks that God is a material body, is he an Apikoros or not? That's pretty important. If you're an Apikoros, very strong consequences follow. Rambam said yes, and the Ravid said no. So there can be machlokes about all sorts of things. In
From the
Kabbalah.
outside, it's our job to kind of understand what the Rabbi was saying. Understand that there are differences, and we have to find them a certain stick to it. We have to appreciate that there could be chalukah days.
Absolutely, just like you would do with Rishonim. You know, when you learn machlokes Rishonim, and now I've come across people who don't get this, but all right. Now go to machlokes Rishonim. How does an Achron learn machlokes Rishonim? What did he hold and what did he hold? You don't learn up and say, Rabbeinu Tam's right and Rashba's wrong. They would shoot you for that if you stood that in yeshiva. Okay, but I had a guy learning the mirror, and I asked him, what would you do if you're researching, examining a machlokes between Rav Yoshev and Rav Wosner? So the great poskim. He said, I would learn up each side and decide who's right. I said, what? You would decide who's right? Who are you? You're going to decide. You could decide who to follow. That's something else. You can pick your postic and go and follow your postic, but you can decide who's right. That's nuts. Then I thought to myself, no, ich bin a Chassidish. So maybe because I'm a Chassidik, I went to Rabbi Meisman, who's a brisker, a real misnagid. He said, they're nuts. They don't come to these people's toenails. They're going to decide who's right. That's just idiocy. They can decide who to follow. If you have smicha, then in a certain sense you're trusted to paskan on your own. Although being medama milsa, if it's not explicit in the literature and you know the literature, and you're going to compare things, the Rambam says that there's somebody bigger than you in the Medina, and you don't have to go to him. Otherwise, you're cursed. That's Perek Chaf in Hilchos Sanhedrin. So it's a pretty serious thing. Today, the Medina is the world. Pick up a telephone and call. You can get to somebody faster than they can get from one end of the Medina to the other. We can get there with a telephone call. So, this is not a game, and it's not free play. If you had a serious illness, you wouldn't say, I'll study the books and decide which surgery to take. You go to an expert and because health is really serious, right? And Hilchos Shabbos is just a game. I'll do it on my own in my spare time and make up my mind. Come on, Hilchos Shabbos is something which, from AZ is Mrs. Besdin. Take it as seriously as surgery, and go to the best expert that you can and get the best idea answer that you can. When there's machlokes, that's something else. And then you can't do any better than to choose one side and follow that side. But of course, that means the Arizal said that every shevet had its own siddur. We had 12 shvatim, Yisachar and Zvulun. Right, Yisachar was sitting and learning the Torah, and Zvulun was out doing work so as to earn money to support Yisachar, and put Zvulun before Yisachar because they're the ones who are the shores that make it happen. The Shvatim had different roles; they had different responsibilities, and they're all necessary for the sake of Klal Yisrael. So, and by the way, having said all of this, I would highly recommend. You take a look at the last chapter of the Mesilas Yesharim, so-called Path of the Just.
Holiness.
Sorry?
Is that holiness?
Yeah, good for you. By the way, what number chapter is that?
9.
26.
Wow.
Number 26, ring a bell with you?
Letters and alphabet. The letters of alphabet.
Good try. There are 22 or 27, not 26. Good try. No, it's the numerical value of Hashem's proper name. The Yud and a Hey and a Vav, and Hey is 26. All right, how many mitos does he discuss? 10. So when I asked my Rebbe Zatzal, my Rebbe is the Boston Rebbe, should I learn Musar? He said, yes, learn Mesilas Yesharim because it's based on Kabbalah. Of course, the Ramchal was one of the greatest Kabbalists. The Gemara said there was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the Arizal, Chaim Vital, and the Ramchal, and the Gemara. And the Gemara said that if he had lived in the times of Ramchal, he would have walked to Italy to be able to learn from him. And when he got hold of the Adir B'Marom, so one of the Ramchal's great Kabbalistic works, he put on his Shabbos clothes to be able to receive it in the kind of glory that it should have. Anyway, so in the 26th chapter of the Mesilas Yesharim, Ramchal is talking about the crux of the system that he's presenting in that sefer, which is Chassid. The highest level of Chassid, the first 17 chapters, if I'm getting it correctly, are about tzaddik, and the last 9 are about being a chassid. And the last chapter, he says, you can be a chassid in many different life conditions. But the idea of chassid, the principle of chassid, is one, and it just expresses itself differently in different life conditions. And the 3 life conditions that he describes there are, one, where your whole life is involved in Torah, learning Torah and teaching Torah. The second is where you own your own business. And the third is where you're a paid laborer. And all 3 can qualify to be a chassid, which means all 3 are chassidim, all 3 sit with the Kadosh Baruch Hu and Olam Haba. The definition of chassidus, as he says in chapter 18, is to do everything to please the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Nachas ruach lebaruch. If that's what you do, then in any of those 3, and that means that being someone who's a full-time learner doesn't necessarily put you any closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu than someone who isn't. That's what Mesilas Yesharim says. So you have to. That's another way of looking at it. Is you look at people. What do they do with their lives? Now, if you could be a doctor and a Talmid Chacham, you should be a Talmid Chacham, because that's the hierarchy. Is if you have more than one ability, more than one life dedication that you are capable of, there's an order which one you should pick. But if you've picked the highest one you can pick, and you serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu as a chassid in that, you're just as good as anybody. That's why the Rambam says that anybody could be as big a tzaddik as Moshe Rabbeinu. Anybody. It doesn't say only anybody in yeshiva. It doesn't say only anybody who writes the Chiddushei Torah. It doesn't say that. It says any Jew could be as big a tzaddik as Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, this looks like a little bit of the high concept of Klal Yisrael, embracing all these different views and ideas and principles and emphases. A great deal of the difference between the groups that you mentioned is relative priorities. It's very rare to find someone who says, you think X is important, we think it's 0. No, but you think X is more important than Y, and we think Y is more important than X. So it's a much subtler disagreement between them than just being off the page. Yeah.
Okay, so right now we have, with the attack on Israel, the 1,400 people killed, you have a lot of anti-Semitism now throughout the world. So I'm wondering what you would say is, where should our thoughts be? And maybe us in Yeshiva, but just us in Israel, because we're getting kind of used to the war happening, especially in Yerushalayim. We don't really see what's going on. Yeah. We're comfortable. So we can kind of become lax a little bit. So where should our thoughts be on the daily basis as this thing goes on, with the growing hatred towards Jews, with the enemies and reinforcing every day, a new nation comes out and gives support to Palestine. So a lot of questions, but basically, where should we have our...
Well, one thing, I don't think it's worthwhile to start speculating, is this Milchemes Gog Magog, and Mashiach around the corner, and so on. I don't think that's worthwhile. I don't think that... And indeed, the Rambam, in the very last chapter of the Mishnah Torah, says that Achri Seyomim, he says something very, I would say, almost extreme. What's going to happen at the end of the days, he says, no one knows. Because the only information we have on it is the verses in the prophets. And the verses in the prophets are vague and ambiguous and contradictory. And we have no oral tradition, he says. So all we have is the verses in the prophets, and we can't interpret them. And he says, don't waste your time on it, because it doesn't lead to Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, loving God and serving God. So, like I would say in general, what's the goal of the whole thing? Olam Haba, no question about it. And the key to getting there is Mashiach. Okay, that's page XX11, in the preface. Now, start with page 1 to 1,000. What do I do? and give those 2 sentences on page XX11, 2 sentences, and then study the 1,000 pages and live it and say, that's where I'm going. But how am I going to get there? Well, Hilchos Tefillin says this, and Hilchos Shabbos says that, Chasher says that, and and studying Torah as best you can, doing Chesed. That's how you're going to get there. Spend your time thinking about how you're going to get there, not where you're going. Where you're going is general knowledge, and then let it go. If Einstein has an aneurysm in his brain and it needs surgery, and you might be able to save Einstein's brain. That's pretty big. And they pick you out and say, we've studied the problem, we studied your background. You're the one who, if anybody can save him, you could save him. Now, if you're doing the surgery on Einstein's brain, you're thinking about, wow, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and CNN. I wonder what suit I'll wear when they swear me in for the Nobel Prize. I wonder if you're thinking about that. That's a big mistake. You got to be thinking about this blood vessel and that particular nerve ending and that piece of flesh, which way you cut. You better be thinking about the details of the surgery. We need to be thinking about the details of the surgery. Now, tefillah is very important. And I think one thing that would be worthwhile is to daven a little more slowly. And try to think about the things that we say. We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to fight our battles. That's one of the brachos. Could think about that. Building Yerushalayim, when Yerushalayim is at least under threat. Is another one that you could think about. Bringing the Mashiach, yes. Have a little more kavanah in bringing the Mashiach. And thinking about something you could do. I'm not talking about dramatic, heroic things, but just something that could be a little better, something that could be a little bit more, because when you invest in something, then you identify with what you invest in. Desta has a whole mamar on that. So in this way, I'll spread it out. I'll add a little bit more. I was teaching a group in Denver many years ago. And one of the students asked me, these were adults, said, it says we're supposed to love other Jews. How do you do that? So I told them about Rav Dessler. Rav Dessler has a Kudras HaChesed, an essay on loving kindness. And his principle is, if you invest in something, you come to identify with it, and that brings you to love it. So if you invest in other Jews, then you'll come to love them. So one of the people there asked me a very good question. Rabbi, there are people in my community and the people in my shul, okay, they're my relatives and people I know from the past, people I can correspond with, but there are millions of Jews. How am I supposed to invest in millions of Jews? If Rav Dessler tells you that investing in them is the way to come to love them, it seems to be utterly impractical. How am I going to do that? So I said, that's a very good question, I'll think about it. I thought about it for a couple of months, and then I thought to myself, wait a minute. What is tefillah? What is prayer? So the Chazon Ish and others say, and don't not to make a mistake, that tefillah is hishtadlus. It's an effort to change the outcome. If I'm not mistaken, the Chazon Ish gives the following example. Someone's drowning in a pond, and you're standing at the shore, you hear him yelling for help. You look around, there's nobody else around. And there's no boat that you can use to go out there and save him. And there's no piece of wood you can throw to him that he can float. And there's no rope that you can throw to him. And you're not a very good swimmer. So you think, well, there's nothing I can do to save him, so I'll daven. That's dead wrong, because davening is a way of saving him. Now, it might not work, but swimming out might not work either. Or pushing the boat out might not work either. No guarantees. But you have to understand, when you're davening, you're doing something that could change the outcome. You're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for a certain outcome. He may listen to your tefillah and make that the outcome. So now I thought, if that's the case, when I daven that Jews should be healthy, I'm doing something to try to make Jews healthy. So I'm making an investment in them. So I qualify for Rav Dessler's essay that I'm making an investment in them, because I'm making an investment. I should be able to come to love them. If I think of prayer as making that investment, then I will be able to fulfill Rav Dessler's principle of making an investment, thereby coming to love. So if you think of people, we say the Achenu. Ha'cheinu kol beis Yisrael. Mishibud legula. I don't know if the three things we want them to come out of, right? Tzara l'rvocha. Tzara means pain, but it also means being bound in tight circumstances. L'rvocha means breath. Afel l'ora, from darkness to light. Mishibu, that means being controlled. To geula, which means being free of control. Isn't that what we're talking about when we talk about the hostages? I mean, so have the hostages in mind. We say those words. Try to focus a little bit more on the words and try to relate the words to the present circumstances. It's one thing that you can do to try to help.
So what, should we be talking about the fate of the Arabs? Should we be talking about the Arabs, Palestinians, Hamas?
I think that...
there are a lot of just kill them all. Righteous people saying that. So I don't know, is that righteous? Is that what righteous people say?
I think that... we
should be filling our mouth with?
I think that's the right question. What should we be filling our mouths with? I don't think it's up to us to make
every last one. That's kind of what I'm hearing. A lot of that.
I know, but I don't think it's up to us to tell Kodesh Baruch Hu what to do. I don't think it's up to us to tell Kodesh Baruch Hu what to do, to make decisions for. I don't think we're competent. The Gedolei Hador, the great scholars of the generation, have not come out with a statement. This is what we should hope for or think is right. I think it's a waste of time. Let me remind you of something that we say about ourselves, and then we'll apply it uncomfortably to the rest of the world. A Jew should give thanks on every breath. Call the neshama ta'alka, I'll call the shima ta'alka. Praise the Kodesh Baruch Hu for every breath. Why? So one explanation is this. Kodesh Baruch Hu gives you breath. He thinks you're still worth living. He's giving you life. That means he's still investing in you. Well, you should be thankful for that investment. And realize that he's investing in you, and thereby have the inspiration to do something, to pick yourself up and to prove what you're doing. Okay, now, lahavdil, he's giving them breath also. So, there's got to be something there that the Kodesh Baruch Hu is investing in, otherwise they wouldn't exist. When I first came to Israel, about 130 years ago, or that's the way it seems, in 1964, I spent a year at Merkaz Rav Kook, from which I got a very, very important, good start in learning. I came in the summer, and I came in after Tisha B'Av, so I didn't even know that we'd nobody there. But the cook was there, a lovely fellow from Yemen. We were talking, and I happened to mention that there's something good about Christians. I think he was going to keel over and die. This poor, dumb, ignorant American who thinks there's something good about Christians. Oh, gosh, I've got a terrible thing. So he said to me, I've got to take you to the Nazir. Now, those days, there was a follower of Rav Kook, who took upon himself to be a Nazir, and he was very famous, living here in Yerushalayim. And he was a very learned man. And this cook said, I'm going to take you to the Nazir, so he'll set me straight, he'll turn me around and try to overcome my terrible heretical thoughts. So in those days, the Nazir was only taking me for 20 minutes. He wasn't well. So we got an appointment, and we go in, and the cook, and my Hebrew was not very good at the time. The cook explained this poor American, who's so ignorant and so foolish that he thinks there's something good about Christians. And the Nazir said that I was right. He said, if something had no purpose in the world, the Kodesh Baruch Hu would not create it, would not sustain it, so there's got to be something there. The Nazir came out, his eyes were glazed, like he didn't know whether to breathe or not to breathe. He didn't know what to do.
Cook.
Huh?
Cook came out. The Nazir came or the cook?
No, the cook who brought me to the Nazir. The tabach.
What does Rav mean by that's something good at the Christians?
Because if something doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever, Kodesh Baruch Hu wouldn't give it any existence.
Rav doesn't know what's good about the Christians. He's saying there must be something good about
There must be some purpose they serve. Maybe, I don't know if the word good is the right word, perhaps, maybe, but something's purpose that they serve. As I said before, if a Jew worships an idol, then it has to be destroyed. Okay, but it serves the purpose of being destroyed. If the Jew makes a statement, this can't be tolerated, this has to be eradicated from the world. That statement and that action are not empty. They're not worthless. You could say L'Shem Yuchad on that. You could say Kodesh Baruch Hu's name is being sanctified by the fact that I'm destroying this thing which has become so polluted that it cannot be tolerated in the world. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps it in existence so that I can destroy it. That's also a purpose. So now, if maybe one of their purposes is to frighten us. And by frightening us, maybe we'll get hold of ourselves and do better. So, just to wish that they'll all be dead. I remember we had a relative once who got involved with some kara idol. And, and this relative is not too learned, so the question of being affected. So I went to the Rebbe Zatzal and I said, what should we daven for? We daven this relative should meet somebody who will inspire or something else. He said, don't make rules for Kodesh Baruch Hu. Daven that Kodesh Baruch Hu should help. Don't tell him what to do. So in the same thing here, we say, help us. Help us. Don't tell him what to do. And these debates are distractions. The person that spent 20 minutes debating whether they should all die or not, ask him, what mitzvah did you do in the last 20 minutes? And if you can't identify the mitzvah you're doing, why weren't you doing mitzvahs to give us more merit rather than doing that? That's what I would say. Yeah.
So it reminds me of the statement, whoever, in this portion it says, whoever blesses you will be blessed, and whoever curses you will be cursed. So any enemy of the Jews has something coming to them. I don't know why history hasn't taught, wrote something.
Look, there are a lot of people around, including Jews in this country, who refuse to learn from history. So I can't, the Yetzer Hara is very clever. The Medrash says that when Jacob wrestled with the angel, that angel was Esau's angel, and Esau's angel is the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, Malach Mavas, the evil inclination. And the Medrash says that half the time he looked like an armed robber, and half the time he was wearing the turban of a Torah scholar. So what the Medrash is telling you is that the Yetzer Hara takes many forms. One type of crime is what's called Omer Mutter, where the person doing it thinks what he's doing is permissible. And even more than that, he may think what he's doing is a mitzvah. Because the Yetzer Hara corrupts his mind. And that can happen. Your mind can become corrupted either by external influences, like Rav Dessa says, or by desires of your own that you don't control. So one of the tricky things about spiritual life is that the Yetzer Tov doesn't wear a sign saying I'm the Yetzer Tov. If you did that, life would be a lot simpler.
Yeah, because I think in this time of age, everybody has a good guy they follow. Everybody has good quotes they follow, and they take the name of holiness and a good idea and they bring it to justify their bad.
I think that's right.
Everyone's doing that.
And I think that one of the key general faults here is that they don't go to people bigger than themselves and ask, is my reasoning right? Is my application right? As you would with other subjects which you thought were serious subjects, and you wouldn't trust yourself, like surgery. So here too, you shouldn't trust yourself. I'll give you one last thing to think about. You've heard the phrase Talmid Chacham, right? Mm-hmm. So you can ask this of people, even people with black hats. Does Talmid Chacham mean a Talmid who is a Chacham, who is wise? Or does it mean a Talmid, a student of a wise person? When you put the two words together, which are they're both nouns, student, wise, is it a wise student or a student of the wise? Now, when it's written that way, it could be either way. But there is a proof which way is meant. And the proof, if you remember this, ask people, you'll get a lot of points, because a lot of people don't know this. The proof is in the plural. The plural is Talmidei Chachamim.
Both plural.
Not, but different. Watch. Talmidei Chachamim and not Talmidim Chachamim. Talmidim Chachamim would mean wise students. Talmidim who are wise. Talmidei Chachamim means students of the wise. So the singular is student of a wise person, not wise student. So if that's the case, when somebody sounds off, the first thing you should ask him is, whose student are you? Who's your Rebbe? Who do you represent? Who are you quoting? If you can't answer that, you have trouble.
Baruch.
Baruch